Good evening, everyone. I'm the chair of Greater Washington 40 Plus of Greater Washington, Greg Collins, and your host this evening. Our organization is an all-volunteer run organization that's been in existence for 69 years. For those of you who are just visiting us and checking us out in our session this evening for the first time. And what we do is provide career professionals the resources and training so that they can not only know and effectively communicate their value, but do that with confidence in securing a new position or maybe making a career transition. We do this primarily through our Monday morning speaker series, and that's sponsored by Fairfax County Economic Development Authority. And with our career transitions course, which we're currently working to improve and upgrade, and this new offering will be in place in the fall. So our speaker this evening is Craig Muckle. I'm proud to say Craig is also a member of our board of directors at 40 Plus, and he's an accomplished award-winning communications professional with more than 35 years of experience in corporate public relations and or in government affairs. Currently, Craig's employed as the director of communications with the Council for Responsible Nutrition. In a few minutes, Craig's going to share with you how he survived a 2-year job search and some tips that you can use, particularly if you've been unemployed for over 6 months. That's oftentimes recognized by employers as long-term unemployment. That's debatable. I'm not sure that's really the case, but for some employers, they would say 6 to 12 months. I would ask this evening, Craig's going to share a lot of information in terms of his history, in terms of some strategies and some tips how to keep going when things are getting rough. So we'd ask you that you would submit these questions either in chat or you could also raise your hand and go ahead and ask the question. We just ask that you stay on mute unless you are asking a question or engaging with Craig throughout the program. So Craig, I'll turn it over to you, my friend.
Okay, Greg, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. And good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to join you today as a presenter and participant. And as Greg mentioned, I'm going to talk about my most recent job search, which thankfully ended on November the 1st of 2021. And I officially started my current position at the Council for Responsible Nutrition on November the 4th of that same year, 3 days later, because after you've been out of work for 2 years, you don't need any other time off before you start your job. And, the one thing I'm going to say is, first of all, I hope none of you go through 2 years of unemployment like I did, because unfortunately, I would say from a professional standpoint was the worst aspect of my professional career. But by the same token, you get to learn a lot about yourself and your family and your support system. And I'm thankful to say I have a great family, great wife, great kids, great support system. And of course, my friends and colleagues at 40 Plus are part of that as well. So, it's really about understanding the resources you have and availing yourself of their full capability. So let me get right into it. And so when I accepted a job, but my search began on October the 11th of 2019 when I was working for the Archdiocese of Washington, and that was actually the third consecutive position that I left. That my departure was not of my own doing. And, my first one was about 7 or 8 months of unemployment. My second one, which was actually after 18 years at Safeway, lasted about 9 months. So neither of those were that bad. Although at the time you're going through it, 7 or 9 months certainly seems challenging. But what I didn't know, obviously, was there was going to be a pandemic along the way and a variety of, and so many other challenges that came with it. So what I thought was going to be, maybe, 9 months to a year ended up being 2 years. But there was just so many indignities that occurred along the way. And I thought I would share a lot of those with you because those are the things that are going to sort of make you or break you. And if you allow it to defeat you, then it's really going to manifest itself on whether you're going to be prepared to even move forward with a job search. And I fought that with a great deal of frequency. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to share my screen with you because I want you to see exactly what my background is. And look, I'm sure each of you are very much accomplished. So I'm not showing you this because I want to brag on myself, because that's not my way. But I really want to just demonstrate to you that I think I have a pretty good deal of experience. I've been thankful to work for great companies like the Archdiocese of Washington, Safeway. I was a professor at Howard University for 5 months. I worked at Rite Aid, as I mentioned, I think BET and ESPN along the way. And I do want to just mention that Melanie Denny, who's on the call today, and I appreciate Melanie being on, this resume looks very familiar to her because she actually helped me craft it. And Melanie was one of the speakers who was on 40 Plus during my job search. And right after Melanie was done with her presentation, I reached out to her because I felt I needed her services. And, you know, the important thing is for me as a communicator, you always feel like if you can't communicate with the public, then how are you going to be able to get a job? And although I knew I could write, I wanted my resume to be basically to stand out amongst the crowd. So I was willing to do whatever it took. So I didn't really engage with Melanie immediately after, but it was probably about halfway through my job search, frankly. And it was very timely nevertheless. So I always want to give credit to Melanie because when recruiters did see my resume, they always said, I have no critique on your resume because it's perfect. So that's an endorsement. And I think it's important just to put yourself in a position to succeed. So first of all, so when I first lost my job, my wife's business partner said to me, hey, Amazon is hiring. So go ahead and, I went ahead and applied to that because I want to get some kind of income coming in, although I did have a severance package. So let me just say, with 35 to 40 years in corporate America, to have to go to a warehouse and do work I had never done before was a little bit off-putting because, look, pretty much they view everyone as the same. And not that I want to come in and be different, but there's a level of comfort I think we all take when we go into a workplace we're familiar with. And this was a workplace I was not familiar with. And so I just kind of wanted to blend in and be accepted. So it took a little while for me to get used to it. And part of the reason it took me a while to get used to it, because frankly, the work was incredibly mind-numbing. It was, very simple. It wasn't challenging. And I just felt like I was going to do it because it was a means to bring money in. And as much as I hated it and my feet were hurting, I was just going to, push through and do what I had to do. So that was the start of it. And then concurrent with that, I immediately began a job search. When I wasn't doing that, I immediately came in and started looking for jobs. So after about 3 months, I actually had an interview with an organization. And here's where I would sort of say the wheels really started coming off, because they wanted to do an interview that was recorded. And I had to do the first part of the interview was I was to basically ask questions to a camera. So we're all on Zoom, and each of you are obviously live people I can engage with. So in this case, I'm basically talking to literally to a camera. And as a spokesperson, I've been on camera countless times. And so I know how to look in the camera, look directly into it, state a message or look at it. But I'm used to really looking at the interviewer because that's what you're supposed to do. And they basically allowed me a take or two to do this. But the other aspect of it is I really did not have a place in my house to do this in a capable fashion. So I'm doing an interview on a computer, very uncomfortable, and I'm then having to find a spot in my house that it looks like I'm in a professional setting. And let me just say, I'm going to just get right to it. After the 6 or 7 questions I was asked, although I could see what, was able to see my questions, my responses, because you could view your videotape, it ultimately was not successful. I never got a call back. And part of the reason for that was, number one, I'm much better when I can engage with people. And then number two, you don't know what they're expecting. And I just felt like that was not a recipe for success. And it just told me I was going to have to do something better. So I'm going to move forward a number of months when we actually had a presenter, Lindsay Ruffin was his name. And Lindsay's someone I know from my time with the Prince George's Chamber of Commerce, where I've been a board member for a long time and chair a committee, which he was a part of. So he was giving a presentation. He's a photographer by trade, but he's, after the pandemic started, he had gotten into talking about preparing yourself for interviews. And it was a great segment that he did. It was an evening presentation. And he got on and talked about how you needed to have all the right equipment, which included having a high definition camera, having a microphone, which you can see here, having a backdrop like I have. And this is a green screen, obviously. And basically making sure, and having appropriate lighting. So in the middle of his presentation, as he's going through it, I went to my then current employer, Amazon, and started ordering the equipment that he was recommending. And I was able to get a kit for a little more than $100, about $135. And I immediately started using that for my interviews. So my goal was to basically check off any impediments that I either knew I was going to have or I thought I was going to have. And since I already had that interview that was, not pretty, I wanted to take that off the radar screen. So I knew going into it, I was going to have all of that covered. Then I am going to go back to the Amazon piece working because, we started into the pandemic. So I started working a few more hours. And because they changed some of the way you were working, you actually got to work by yourself a little more, which was great. So I started working in trailers, unloading trucks where I could just be by myself and that sort of thing. And so I'm a very competitive person. So I tried to see how fast I can unload a truck. So why is this relevant? Because ultimately, they liked the way I was doing the work so much. One of the supervisors asked me, hey, would I like to become a trainer? Well, I said, what does that entail? And they basically said, you don't have to do this work all the time. You can now train people who are coming in. And I said, well, gee, I was a professor at Howard. I think I can train people. I've tutored people in the past as well, students. So I said, if it means I can have to do less of this, I'm all in on that. And so I became a trainer because the other thing I said was, not that I thought of it at the time because I did not, but ultimately, as I became more and more involved in what we called at Amazon a learning ambassador, I said, you know what? Training people is transferable to the kind of work I do. You're always, because I have aspired to have a full complement of employees working for me. So it's about mentoring, it's about training, it's about guiding people through the work. And so after about a year of being a learning ambassador, I started talking about it as part of the skills I've learned along the way. So again, I say that because it's important to understand that you may not like what you're doing, but ultimately you have to look for ways to make yourself marketable. So let me move on to what was really three of the most frustrating situations that occurred, and they're all about the same thing. So you get it, and I've been through the 40 plus program now 6 years ago. After I was left Safeway, again, enforced unemployment, 40 plus was recommended to me by a then board member. And I immediately got involved, took the course, and took advantage of the resume and all the teammate stuff and things like that. So one of the things that 40 plus always says is use your network. So I did. As I mentioned, I was on a board of a chamber of commerce. I'm still on two boards of chambers of commerce, plus I was on an urban league board. So between those three boards right there are about 100 people. I sent them all an email telling them my situation. And literally I got, out of all those people, I got a number of people writing me back, three of which said, I know someone who's looking for a job in a communications person. I'm going to put you in contact with them and see what happens. So in one circumstance, the person, they had their own PR firm and they wanted me to be their second in command. They were the owner. They basically wanted a chief of staff. And this person she pretty much offered me a job, but she said she had to get through some hurdles first, which was fine. Well, she said she would stay in touch. Little did I know staying in touch would not mean having another conversation with me for literally 6 months, although I would continually follow up. Now, of course, the person that put me in contact with her asked me how things were going. And I would tell him, hey, I haven't heard from her. Can you check in? Well, he was having a hard time getting with her as well. So that was one situation. And I'm going to come back to that because it kind of gets worse there. I had another situation where, again, I was offered, someone said, I have a position. I know someone has a position for you that you should look at. I sent it in. I got interviewed by 2 of their staff members. And I thought it went great. I followed up, said with a thank you note that same day, and crickets. The same thing happened a third time. This time it wasn't an organization with whom I had a contact, but by the same token, it came through a headhunter. And I interviewed once or twice. I think it was actually twice because it was one with a senior person, then once with the team I thought I might be joining. And once again, I was ghosted out. In spite of the fact I would contact them countless times along the way, just asking for an update and just really wanting to know what the disposition of the job was. And, those are incredibly frustrating because really at that point, you're thinking that, did you do something wrong? But it got to the point where I just felt like have people actually forgotten how to treat people? And those are the sorts of situations that can really start playing mind games with you, because if they're not communicating with you, if you're not giving you any feedback, you don't know if you had a successful interview, if they didn't like your qualifications or anything like that. And without someone in the other 2 cases who can maybe find out something for you on the side and advocate for you, I didn't have that in this third situation. So those were incredibly challenging and really started playing, it frankly messes with your mind a little bit. And So my frustration's starting to build over the course of time because now, I'm going through a lot of money that I had saved up in order to, keep our family afloat. My wife is a full-time realtor, so she does very, very well, but there's still lots of obligations and I'm expected to fulfill them. And, frankly, as a man in the family, you want to feel like you're contributing capably to support your family. So there's just a lot of other, dynamics that we're entering into, the situation. So before I continue, Greg, are there any comments that people have that need to be addressed? Because this will also allow me to take a drink of water, actually, too.
Yeah, no, there's not, but let's just, even though there's not anything in the chat, let's just open it up right now. Does anyone want to ask Craig a question or have any, feedback or reactions to what he said? Yes. Sasha, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask
Good
Craig
afternoon,
your question.
everyone. 1 second. You see me?
Yes. Hi, Sasha.
Yes.
How are you?
Hi, how are you? Good afternoon.
Good.
So I have a similar situation to you, but I'm like 6 months into it. So can you give us some tips about the dynamics when you're the household and you lose that income? What tips can you give to us to not feel the pressure of all the bills coming at the same time? What can we do? Even if I call the establishment, the mortgage company, the leasing office, or the banks, the homeowners, the credit cards, you don't get a lot of information from them to help you. So what can you advise from your experience on this platform for someone like myself or anyone there on the screen?
Sure, it's a good question. So thankfully, I have to say I didn't have a lot of that in my circumstances, largely because I got a bit of a severance package and I had some money saved. But the first thing I did try to do to kind of answer your question is when I realized this was going to be long-term, I tried to pay down some of the larger bills that I had so I wouldn't have to deal with some of the things you're asking about. But my guidance would be to talk to your creditors and let them know what you're going through. Because in many cases, they will work with you if they know you're enduring a long-term period of unemployment or even underemployment. And especially in the time we've been coming out, and then there's still lots of people who are, not fully employed, if employed at all. And so you want to be forthcoming and say, I'm having a difficulty because I'm simply not employed. And also, as Kirk mentioned here, and I appreciate Kirk's comment, you do want to apply for unemployment as quickly as you can. Because here's the one thing I did find out. I was actually able to extend my unemployment for a greater period of time, largely because I had a part-time job with Amazon. Because what happens is unemployment will give you less because you are working something along the way. So that's a part of it. So because I was able to extend it, I actually had my unemployment go on for about a year, which was actually pretty helpful. And the one other thing that benefited me at the particular time was because when the pandemic first started, they were also giving an additional bump in the unemployment. I forgot what it was called, but at the end of the day, between the unemployment and the regular unemployment and the extra money they were giving because of the pandemic, I was pretty much making close to my regular salary on a weekly basis. So that was a blessing right there. Now that's gone away. So Sasha, to continue to answer your question, the other thing I would say is because the kind of work I did where I've done a lot of writing and stuff like that, use your skills that you've learned professionally and see if there's a way you can tangibly put those to good use as a part-time employment, whether as a contract service provider. I don't know the kind of work that you do, but
well, let me give you a quick. I'm a federal employee. I work for the Department of Defense. I have a top secret clearance.
okay.
So what happened was they didn't reach their 80% mark when they had the vaccinations. I also was a registered RN for them and credentialing. So the departments didn't reach that with their employees, so they started to let go. So that's how I got unemployed. And that happened recently in July of last year.
Right.
So I wasn't expecting, any of these things to happen first time. So I'm glad that I'm on the platform today to ask these questions, because no one knows what the next 6 months would look like.
Exactly. So, so Sasha, if you're a medical professional, and
Yes.
clearly, I think, not that I'm in the industry certainly, but there's still likely a need. So, the one thing I might say is you should think about looking under every rock possible. And that might include, obviously, getting on LinkedIn and finding other people who are medical professionals to see what they know, but also, places like school systems or certain kinds of facilities may have a need for an in-house or even someone to come in and provide care service,
Okay.
even like a hospice. I happen to be a board member for a hospice. That's why I thought of it, and that sort of thing, where you can go to someone's home and provide care. And maybe that's the sort of thing you can put an ad somewhere, like on, online. I'm forgetting the one place. My brother would kill me because he told me to look there for a job. But there's lots of places you can put your services out there, and people will hire you and search them out very quickly. And that could be a way for you to get back in to do something, number one, that number two, that you like, and that can possibly, if it doesn't lead to direct employment itself, it will certainly allow you to say, I am still working. Because I think once you start getting into a longer term situation, like it sounds like you're in now,
Yeah.
prospective employers want to see you're trying to do something to keep your skills fresh. And obviously, you're not going to forget how to care for people as a medical professional, but it does give them some solace knowing you're still trying to apply the skills you've learned either, in college or certainly along the way. So I hope I answered some of your questions there.
Yes, thank you. And if maybe later on you can send me the link for hospice, I can try them.
I'll be happy to do that.
All right.
Sure. Ron, are there any other questions? I know there's some comments coming through, so I want to just make sure that we're attacking them. Or Greg, excuse me, sorry. And you're on mute, Greg.
Yeah, no, most have been kind of specific that Ron's been keeping up with. I'm just trying to see if there's anything generals in there. But I'd proceed for now. Go ahead, Craig.
Okay, no problem. Thanks.
Yeah.
So I talked about the three situations where I was ghosted out. And so let me go back to the first situation. So after about 6 months, the owner of the PR agency actually did follow up with me. And that person said, well, I'm basically at a point where I think I can bring you on. And she wanted me to provide her with my salary requirements. I did that. She then wanted me to meet with a close confidant of hers. And I met with that person. And then before I hung up with her, before these couple of things occurred, I said to her, so would you be okay if I told my wife that it looks like this is going to happen? Because I didn't want to tell my wife that this was likely to be an opportunity if it wasn't going to be. And she said yes. In spite of all of that, nothing happened. I was ghosted a second time. And I would just tell you, to be honest with you, that since that second time, I haven't even heard from her at all. So she may know I'm employed, which obviously she would have no reason to contact me, but it's likely that if I wasn't employed, I still wouldn't have heard from her anyway. And at that point, it just got to be insulting that people cannot treat other human beings fairly. And maybe it's a byproduct of the pandemic and people forgot how to engage with each other. I don't know, but it was frankly maddening. So ultimately, and I noticed down one of the comments, optimism is a great tactic. And I do think I'm the glass half full person. But I will say it was very, very, very difficult to remain optimistic all the time when you're constantly getting told, either getting no feedback or you're getting, the platitudes like you're an excellent candidate, but, and, there's only so much you can take of that, especially when you're qualified, you can help people. And, let me just say, since we're in I'm on a group of my peers, I happen to be 62 years old. And I think I fool a lot of people with my age, but because I'd like to think I don't look that way. But ultimately, people can say I've been working for 35 or 40 years. So clearly I've been around the block a few times. And now I'm just going to skip ahead for a moment because I do think this is important. Since I've been employed, I've gone to several conferences where they've talked about hiring for people, and there've been a lot of young people there. And then I've actually asked some of the recruiters about, you want people who are experienced, but yet you're not willing to pay for people like myself. You always are looking for the young talent, which in theory, I get, but what I don't get is why people who are valuable like myself are not coveted. Because at the end of the day, you're going to pay for it in one form or another. Because what you can't pay for is the experience that I would bring. Someone like myself, I would bring. People like yourselves that you would bring. And that's always underestimated. And I've begun challenging people who are in positions of hiring to remind them that people like ourselves should not have to go through endure 2 years of unemployment and be treated poorly. I made it very clear that I didn't appreciate those situations, although none of those folks obviously did it to me, but I wanted to remind them that there's a way to treat people. And they all acknowledged that was completely unprofessional, but the benefit I got out of it was I made contacts because of it. So if I'm hopefully ever in a job search again, not of my own making, those are people who I can maybe talk to and say, ask them, can you lead me to water? So you should not, once you're employed, you should never be afraid to talk about the challenges you endured, to remind people that there's a way to treat those of us who are unemployed or have been unemployed for any period of time, and remind them that we're people too with feelings, and we just want what everyone else wants, is to be gainfully employed in the field of our choosing, regardless of our age. So, so let me see. So there's one other thing that I think is relevant here. So as I'm going through the job search and starting to now talk to a lot more recruiters and that sort of thing, one person said something to me that really resonated. And this is a great takeaway for all of you. The person said that you need to do something to make yourself found. And what they meant was this: doing something that would put myself in more of the public domain. So myself, as someone who has to write for a living, And I've written for corporate executives for many years. I've ghostwritten stories, I've ghostwritten newsletters and stuff like that. I've written long form, I've written short form, I've written just about everything imaginable. The only thing I really haven't done, thankfully, I guess, but not sometimes I say I wish I would have a chance to do it, is write speeches for my bosses, because I've worked for people who wrote their own material. So good in one way, not so good in another. But the one thing I did do was, because of that, I started writing, and because of a lot of the things that were happening with racial inequities and the George Floyd situation, I started writing about how I thought corporate America could become more involved in helping the racial inequities that we saw. And so I wrote about that, and I posted it on Medium, which is a place where you can post blogs, and there's a kind of a ready-made audience. And then you can link it to your other accounts, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, whatever you have, so people can find you. And then I tried to turn that into, and really, before I get to the other piece of it, the title, or one of the sub-themes of my writing, was really opportunity over optics. That was the theme of my blog post. And I was really challenging corporate America to, are you going to get involved or do something because it looks good to the public, or are you going to do it because it's a real opportunity to, number one, help the community, make the community better, which in turn will provide a return to you through equity with your constituencies. Because really, from a public relations standpoint, today's constituents, your customers, are so savvy, they're going to know whether you're doing something for optics or for show, and you don't really mean it, or if you're really doing it because you care about the community. And there's many, it's real easy to do things for optics, but it's harder to do things that are real opportunities, because those are things that are going to take a lot of work, heavy lifting. But so that was the theme of my blog post. I turned that into a bit of a podcast, and where I would talk to public relations professionals that I knew, because obviously that's the profession I've been, so I have a lot of friends in the business, and we would talk about issues. Now, truth be told, I only wrote one blog post and I only did one podcast, but I had content I could share. And that's really what it was all about. And with that content, in fact, what I can do, I'm going to change my backdrop for a minute, because as part of that, I have backdrops for my podcast that say opportunity over optics. And so I actually trademarked this, opportunity over optics, because I didn't want anyone taking it. And I have it actually in a couple of formats. And so those were things I did because I wanted people to see the kinds of things I had going on. So, and you can still see me on screen, right?
Yes,
Hello?
we can, correct.
Oh, okay, good, okay,
Yeah.
because when I was messing with my screen, I kind of screwed stuff up here. Here we go.
Right, you're good.
So I just wanted to make sure you can still see me, because I don't want to disconnect myself. So, so I turned that into some content, and I started, and then I would share that my blog post when I would get, I would submit that with my resume and other things I was sending in. And when I was getting interviewed, those became conversation pieces for those people I was interviewing with. And so that was good, because then it allowed me to not only talk about the work I was doing there, but more importantly, it gave them some insight as to how I might help them as a corporate communication strategist. So let me talk about the company that hired me, because there's a funny story in and amongst that there. So with all the other indignities I suffered, I applied for the Council for Responsible Nutrition, my current employer. The first job I applied for, which, and remember I just said first, so that should be a cue that there was more than one situation here. The very first job I applied for was a senior director of communications. I had a great interview with the person that is now my boss, but he didn't hire me for whatever reason the first time. So this was about a year into my job search. So this was basically November of 2020, if I remember the timing correctly. And for whatever reason, I didn't get the job. And I was a little irritated because I thought I was right there. So I went ahead and went on their website to see who the selected person was. And I saw, and I went, looked her up on LinkedIn. I said, okay, she's pretty well credentialed. So in the overall scheme of things, I could be mad it wasn't me, but I wasn't furious, I guess I would say. So moving on to 2021, they ultimately had another job, which is the director of communications, which was obviously a lesser job than the job I first went for. And the first job was going to be at or a little higher than my previous job. This job was going to be about a 20% decrease in salary of the posted salary. So I did ultimately apply for the job. And the guy who interviewed me first, Brian, who's now my boss, said to me, you know, this is a lower level job. I said, yes, I do know that. He said, do you really want to go through with it? So he gave me about a week to think about it. And as the week was ending, he said, "Oh, you want to go through it?" And I said, you know what? I thought this. I said, beggars can't be choosers. So I went ahead and submitted again. So this time, the person who interviewed me was the young lady who got the first job. So we get on Zoom, and I'll be perfectly honest with you. I wasn't sure how it was going to go because I did not know if she knew I applied for her job. And I did not know how I was going to react because I knew I still had a little animosity because she had a job I thought I should have. So to her credit, she was very disarming because when she gets on with me on Zoom, the first thing she says to me was, I don't even know why I'm interviewing you. It's clear you can do this job. So whatever animosity I would have had was gone. Then we had a conversation. It was great. I talked to her for like an hour. And then after we were done, she reached out to me on the side and said, you know, I really want you to get this job. I'm going to recommend you for this job. And there were a couple other candidates that they had. And so, and it was Kirk, I completely agree. And I told her that, because now that we're colleagues, that I thought that was fantastic. So Brian, my now boss, says to me, I don't need to interview you, but you know, there's one more set you got to go through. So before I got to that final set of interviews with the CEO of the organization, Brian touches base with me and says, hey, there's another job available that's actually a little higher that could make you more money. So it was a government affairs job, of which I spent about 25 years doing as part of my communications work. So I interviewed with a third person at CRN, who was the VP of government affairs, and that went great as well. So I finally said to her, I said, look, and her name was Julia. I said, Julia, here's what you need to know. I've interviewed with Brian once, I interviewed with Kendall once, and now I'm interviewing with you. And I said, this is the third time, obviously, with your organization. And all I want to know is, if you guys don't want to hire me, that's fine. Just tell me now so I can move on. I said, if you're serious, I think I've demonstrated I'm serious because I've interviewed with you 3 times, with someone there 3 times. But I think I can make a contribution to the organization. And she appreciated the fact that I was honest with her in that regard. And ultimately, I did an interview with the CEO, and ultimately I got the job. The one other thing I'll bring up about Kendall, who's my now colleague, is before we got off the initial Zoom call, I asked her, because by this time she was so disarming, we were actually like, we were talking as if we knew each other forever. I asked her, I said, did you know I applied for your job? And she said, I absolutely did. And she said, if I was going to be that concerned about you coming here, I would never have had them put you in the mix in the first place. So it spoke highly of her, that she's confident enough in her abilities. And, she clearly thought enough of me to not worry about me coming in and trying to, take her job, because I'm not that kind of person. I want to contribute. And and ultimately, she's been a great colleague. Brian's been a great boss. And, Julia's been a great as well. So I say that because, you still have to advocate for yourself, and you have to advocate in a way that you can do it so they understand you're advocating, but you want to just make sure you're still getting treated appropriately. Because I didn't want to be ghosted another time. And I just figured that after 3 times, you're either going to know if you want me, or you're going to know you're not going to want me. So, I appreciate them making I would just appreciate them making a decision. And they sent me an offer letter about a week later when they came back from a conference. And, it literally took me 5 minutes to sign it, although I probably sent it back an hour later. So that's pretty much the nuts and bolts of what I wanted to say. It's, we're about 45 minutes into this. So let me open it up if there are any other comments or questions right now. And then I can probably wrap it up with some other parting comments. I think Kirk is raising his hand.
Yeah. Go ahead, Kirk.
Open your mic, Kirk.
I had a scam pulled on me about a week ago. I got a contact via text message, and they said they wanted to hire me for a position with a company in Massachusetts. And it sounded like a good job, but it smelled fishy. They asked me a number of questions over about 45 minutes and then said I'm hired. And there were no technical questions, and I'm a Delphi computer programmer. So that seemed odd. And then when I asked them, how is it going to work? They said, well, you're hired. We're going to send you. I said, what about hardware? Do you supply it or do I? Because I've been working from home. I'm capable of that. And he said, we're going to send you a check, and you deposit the check into your banking account and then go buy your gear at this other vendor. And the minute they told me that, I really got suspicious. And so I emailed the company they said they were representing, and I got an email back saying, no, we don't know these guys, this is a scam. So report it to your local police. So I did, and a check for $5,800 came in the mail. And so I, gave it to the police, but be careful about this kind of thing.
Yeah, well, Kirk, you were astute enough to obviously realize that was a scam. And, there's so many things that people are doing now because people are, desperate for work. So that's a great anecdote just to remind people that you know, especially everything's is done electronically, you want to make sure that the jobs are coming from a reputable source or coming directly from the organization who's seeking a job. So, there's lots of ways to find out, whether it's through LinkedIn and other job search engines, to see if those jobs are actually available. And the one thing I'll certainly do is, plugging one of our sponsors, FCEDA. They have a website, and that's a great resource where you can look up jobs in Northern Virginia in particular, because they have about 80 to 90,000 jobs that are linked to their website. So that's a great tool to use to make sure if the job happens to possibly be, or if the position that claimed to be available is in Virginia, that's another opportunity to maybe use that as a resource to see if that job is available. But appreciate you bringing that up, Kirk. Does anyone else have any questions?
I got a question for you, Craig.
Sure.
One thing I was really curious about was when you mentioned the importance of your friends and your family supporting you through the process, and also colleagues along the way. I was wondering, just for yourself and individually, when you hit those times of just frustration, I'll put it this way, what was like the self-talk you gave to yourself? That even the best of well-wishing and advice people could give, but at some point you hit that point of loneliness, and it's like, okay, how did you get yourself back in gear when you were those times you're just frustrated, like we go through and sliding off? I mean, would you share that with us?
Yeah, Greg, look, I cried on my wife's shoulders a number of times. Frankly, I cried many times and no one here knew it. But the other thing I did, I'm active. I'm a bowler, as you know. I'm a competitive league bowler, tournament bowler. So I have outlets. I officiate basketball. And so those are places where I can go and feel like I can either release tension or just it's a distraction. And I can take my mind off and re-energize myself and refocus on, those things that I enjoy, those things that I do. And, so use those outlets. I saw some people say you can exercise, and those are great outlets. And so, and the other thing you could do, and I did some of this, and, again, I'm going to draw on some of the experiences I learned through just being part of the 40+ presentations, is you can always continue to educate yourself through a lot of the websites that are available, online learning courses where you can hone your skills or learn other skills. And those are great ways to, use some of your energy in a positive way. Because ultimately, it is about feeling like you want to continue to press through and find a job. You want to feel like you're preparing yourself for that next interview. But, I had a friend of mine, and a good friend, Keith Howard, who knew I was going through, and he did a podcast with Dr. Sherry Yoder, who's been on 40+ at least a time or two. And she's a therapist, and she normally helps women out, but she invited me to talk about my job search on her podcast. And she basically, a lot of the things I've spoken about today, I chatted with her about, and she asked me how I persevered through all of that, how I thrived through that. And I found that to be very, very cathartic for me because, I don't think I shed a tear, but I was welling up during that podcast because I needed a couple of moments to gather my composure because I was emotional. And you just, even talking to you today, I've been very emotional at times because it just reminded me of something that was very disheartening, very, frustrating. And if you're ever there, first of all, I hope you're not. But the other thing is too, lean on that network. I have a church family that I depended upon as well. I talked to my pastor. I talked to friends, I prayed with fellow parishioners, and that's an outlet. Anywhere where you have people who will just listen and be supportive and offer comfort and guidance and solace, those are the people you want to engage with. Surround yourself with people who have a positive spirit, positive thought, positive vibe.
Yeah.
So wherever you can do that, wherever you can burn off that frustration, that tension, avail yourselves of those activities and opportunities.
Thank you, Craig.
Sure.
I think you touched on this, but I'll just expand it more. The role that volunteer work can give, whether it was a 40 plus or anywhere else where you have an interest of helping out, because you never know when that can also expand your
Yes.
network. There could be full-time work opportunities at those organizations as well. So there's a great value in doing volunteer work.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. And, I had a volunteer, obviously, a lot of the places, things I mentioned as volunteer boards, I was already engaged with, but those are great ways to enter into an organization, engage with people, and find maybe a position. They may have a position internally in that organization you're volunteering with, because they get to know you. And here's the funny thing, look, I hated the work at Amazon, but the one thing about Amazon, especially I was there for 2 years, I did meet a lot of very good people who, although I'll probably never see them again, I do follow Amazon, the warehouse I was in, on Instagram, because they have an Instagram account. And I follow them. I see many of the people I engage with. And I had a couple of people who said to me, why don't you become something else in the warehouse? I said, I didn't want to. I wanted to go back to be a professional in what I was doing. And I remember what one guy, Charles, said to me. He says, you walk around here with a confidence like you should be leading something, like you should be running something. And he said, that's why I'm asking you, why don't you look for another opportunity in here? Because it just looks like, you come across like a person who should be in a leadership role. And I appreciated him saying that, because really, at the end of the day, people are always watching you. And I learned that from being a basketball referee. You never know who's watching you when. And even though Charles was not going to hire me certainly there, he certainly saw something that I was hoping a person that would hire me would see, is that this person should be in a leadership capacity, some way, somehow.
Yeah.
And so always keep yourself, looking like you're ready for that opportunity, because you never know who's watching and who may lead you down the path of prosperity.
Good points.
So,
Right.
Are there any other questions or any comments that people want to make? And if there aren't any, first of all, I'd like to know, did you find anything that I said helpful today? And if so, you can just put a thumbs up or something in the chat to let us know that.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I do want to make sure that this was helpful to people. Oh, Sasha, thank you very much. You have 6 thumbs. That's pretty good. You got a lot of dexterity. Thank you, Alyssa. Yeah. Great. So, I obviously, you may not have questions now, but I'm going to give you my email address. I have a 40+ address since I am a volunteer. And so it's Craig.Muckle, Muckle, at 40plusdc.org. And feel free to contact me there. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to help. And again, the one other thing I'll say that's important, because in my time with 40+, I've heard a lot of people grapple with this, that you're trying to balance your finances and minimize your expenses. But The money I spent on Melanie's services, the money I spent on camera equipment, and the other things I did to, create a podcast and all that imaging. First of all of that stuff is tax deductible because your job search is a deductible expense on your taxes for the next year. But ultimately, it's an investment in yourself. And it's very important to invest in yourself because you are your greatest resource. And so if you're not willing to invest in yourself, no one else is going to do that for you. So I just want to remind you that take a moment and, invest what's necessary in yourself.
All right. Okay. There's any more questions or comments? We'll wrap things up here. We've also posted your email in the chat, Craig.
Thank you.
If someone wants to contact you. So just keep in mind, everyone, that we do this every Monday. Almost every Monday, we'll have a session. So please go to our website at 40plusdc.org and come back and see us again. And good luck with your job search. All right.
Yeah, good luck, everyone. Hopefully, it'll be a lot less time than 2 years. All right, Michelle, give me Michelle, you can contact me via email. I'm happy to talk to you about that.
Okay. Thank you.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
You too.
Okay.
Great presentation.
Thank you very much.
All right. Well, I guess we'll wrap things up here for this evening. Everyone enjoy their evening and again, good luck with the search and come back and see us again.
Thank you, Craig, for being so honest and open. You don't really get your employees like that out here. And I appreciate all that insight. So thank you for sharing.
You're very welcome. Happy to
Thank
do
you.
it. And Melanie, thank you for being here and thank you for your comments. Appreciate it.